Once again, I want to welcome you so much. I want to thank the entire team for your coming, because this could have not been the way it is were it not that you didn't come. Mine is just to set the tone for this function. Actually, from what MC has said, it's just good to correct that we are not really launching. We really just want to bring this into perspective, just to catalyze. Already we are aware of the reasons why we need to go green energy. And we know very well, coming to the end of this year, we are going to have COP25 that will be in Chile. And part of the agenda for that meeting will be the need to check on the Kyoto Protocol, that is the 10% forest cover in the world and in Kenya for that, in that context. And I think we have a responsibility as citizens of this nation, Kenya, to comply with this protocol. We are about 7%. I'm sure the ministry is here. They'll give us the figures, hopefully. But we're not doing any better. I think we have a responsibility to see whether we could push our forest cover to 10 plus, because that's where we need to be. We look at the demand of firewood. The demand of firewood in this country is moving up every day because of the population growth. So far, the demand is standing at about 18.7 million cubic meters annually. And it is projected from the ministry figure that by 2030, this will move to 21.7 million cubic meters of wood. That is by 2032, sorry. So where are we as a country? Where are we as KTDA? Where are we as small-scale farmers? Because then KTDA is owned by small-scale farmers. So there's a thin line between the farmers and the KTDA, because KTDA is farmers and farmers are KTDA. A report is by 2013, there were 3 million agricultural residues that was produced. That was 2013. Then most are coming from fodder, from animals, waste, manure, biomass energy, but with low levels. The figures are coming up because if you see, we've got coffee husks, maize cobs, coconut shells, we have bagasse, which is moving. The figures are going up. So there's an opportunity to exploit this waste and convert them to energy that can be exploited either by the farmer at household level or by the factories for our steam generation. So ideally, even as I close, because that's one of my opening remarks, I want to just encourage all of us today to be open-minded. And I know change is difficult, but change is real. Let's look at this thing outside the box and be able at least to switch. Because us is to talking about switching from firewood to alternative fuel. And what are the levels? Do we have enough in this country to sustain us? So we are talking about switch, thinking about 30%. Can we realize that? So I'm sure speakers will talk about that, but for me, I just want to recognize the presence of the participants. I want to welcome Rainforest Alliance, who are actually the convener of this. I'm sure they're in the house. I want to recognize KTDA, who are users and producers at the same time. Feel welcomed. There's ENSO Impact, who are working very closely with ERCHRE to facilitate the entire thing. We are great that you are in the house. We have KFS. I hope there's a representation from the ministry and the KFS, because then there's a thin line between KFS and the ministry. So the two are supposed to be the house. We've got farmers in the house. We have civil societies. We have CBOs. So even without naming names, and even producers, some producers of briquettes are in the house. So feel very welcome. This is an interactive session.
You all agree that production of tea is an energy-dependent venture, whereby up to 30% of the cost of producing tea is as a result of firewood. Unfortunately, over 85% of these energy needs in tea industry comes from firewood. So you can all imagine how much it means to the environment. What does that tell us? Because again, we need to have tea today and have tea tomorrow, and for our children and grandchildren too, to have tea. May I apologize on behalf of the hotel that when you went there to serve tea, Most of you are not happy because you didn't find your brand. I don't know if I should apologize on behalf of the hotel or it's a challenge for you to do more marketing. It's both. Because in the next forum, I would like to test Ketepa and Maisha on our table. We are introducing a project which is aimed at catalyzing, use of alternative fuel in tea production, looking at what alternatives are available, because as at Rainforest Alliance, we believe that human beings or people and nature must thrive together in harmony. And you notice that tea sector makes the biggest certification program for Rainforest Alliance. And if nothing is done today, because of climatic changes, the suitable areas for tea in the world is going to change drastically by 2050. And that means low production of tea or no tea at all. So what are we doing as Rainforest Alliance? Partnering with KTDA and ENSO Impact, we are launching a project. We are calling it Empowering Rural Communities and Households with Renewable Energy, which is aimed at catalyzing the use of other alternatives in the tea sector, the use of other energy alternatives for producing or processing tea. So we aim at reducing the amount of firewood which is consumed in production. By so doing, we mitigate on greenhouse gases emission in the tea industry. And the goal is actually to reduce firewood consumption by 30%. It's ambitious. We are calling it partial switch, because at the moment we do not aim at switching 100%. We want to switch by, say, 30%. Not in all factories, because this is a pilot, but in only 12 factories, whereby KTDA will unveil those factories. If we are able to get cheap, alternative, and clean sources of fuel, and so reduce the energy cost in tea factories, we believe that these tea factories will be able to gain in terms of profitability. And when tea factories gain in terms of profitability, this goes down all the way to the farmer. It's an industry that can also create employment for men, women, and youth. And as I mentioned, we are partnering with KTDA with 12 factories. When we talk about energy in the tea industry, we cannot isolate the fact that the tea factories require energy, and the tea farmers, at the same time, require energy for cooking, for heating, lighting, and much of this energy comes from biomass. So you can see the amount of stress which the vegetation has been subjected to in the tea growing zones. The factories and the farmers are competing for biomass fuel together, and that motivates us to look for an alternative. So apart from trying to catalyze the switch, the partial switch in tea factories to using briquettes, we are also empowering farmers to use alternative fuel. And that is why we are bringing in the issue of carbonized charcoal briquettes made from sawdust, made from coffee husks, made from rice husks. Therefore, we are empowering farmers and individual entrepreneurs in the tea growing zones. At the moment, we are focusing on 3 counties, that is Murang'a, Kiambu, and Nyeri, aiming at establishing about 10 or over 10 what we call household energy centers, empowering them to trade in and disseminate improved cookstoves, as well as alternative biomass fuel, which in this case is briquettes. By so doing, we hope to create a number of jobs, and we aim at reaching over 50,000 households in the region. Now, To shift to briquettes or co-firing in the industry, of course we all agree that briquette is a new fuel. Not everybody knows how to handle briquettes, especially in deep factories. So this project will focus on rigorous training at different levels. We're going to conduct training at factory level, sitting with factory boiler operators for up to 3-4 days, sitting with them, showing them, demonstrating to them how to co-fire, demonstrating to them how to store briquettes, because again, you understand that you cannot store briquettes, you cannot transport briquettes the way you do firewood, isn't it?
A little bit of history. So I first started to work and got interested in energy in the tea sector probably about 6 or 7 years ago. And I was introduced by a friend and colleague called Jane Niambura, who works with the Ethical Tea Partnership. And she was the person that introduced me to the KTDA factories. And that was really the start of my journey. And so I have to give a lot of credit to Jane and all of these other people along the way who've helped me to begin to understand what's a really complex issue. And when I first sort of discovered KTDA, I thought this was a really amazing business. I think it's quite unique. I don't know of any other businesses like this. And I see that it really has the power to transform lives. This 600,000 smallholders that it represents, that actually own the business, one industry that can deliver change for so many people, that's a really powerful instrument for change. So that was really interesting for me. But of course, energy is a massive part of the production process of tea. And KTDA has been dealing with this energy challenge for decades. We're talking about a change now. George said, change is difficult. The expression I heard, the only one that likes change is a wet baby, right? And KTDA has been facing this change for years and years. They haven't always been burning firewood. They used to burn fuel oil. So this evolution of change and innovation, all driven by things like climate change, sustainability, this is not a new issue. This is not a new problem. But I wanted just to emphasize how I see the importance of KTDA as an agency that can deliver benefit for hundreds of thousands and perhaps millions of people. And that's a really unique position that it occupies. We're talking about briquettes, or we're talking about firewood, but what really is needed here is energy. And it doesn't really matter what form that energy comes in. There's this expression that you don't buy a drill because you want a drill, you buy a drill because you want a hole in the wall. And it's the same here, whether it's firewood or briquettes, what KTDA requires is energy. And I know that with the likes of GIZ who are here as well, there's a much wider investigation and inquiry into energy more broadly, whether it's renewable, solar thermal, energy efficiency, boiler transitions, whatever it is. All of these can contribute to that goal of reducing the cost of energy that puts more money in the pocket of the tea farmers, which is ultimately the goal. So I'm interested in how we reach millions of people. I suppose the other thing that's interesting for me is this connection between industrial processes, so industrial energy consumers, and people at the household level. We go to a tea factory, we see the wood piles, we understand this is part of the process. But what we don't see is the people in their households also burning firewood. Because their options are very limited. So the question for me in designing this project is how we connect these two issues. Energy consumption at the factory level, but also at the household level. And that's really where ENSO has worked with entrepreneurs, and I can see some of our friends here, like Mary now, who's becoming famous, and thank you, Mary. Well, you got one of the entrepreneurs that make briquettes for use in the household, and we got Kihara, who produce these alternative briquettes that can be used in a household level. But the question is how you link these two parts of the system together. And again, if we consider the way that energy is used right across Kenya. It's our energy system. And when you have as big a player as KTDA, they have the potential to really drive change in the system. And this is what I'm very interested in. And I'm sure all of the other briquette producers and the people who are concerned about sustainable energy, whether it's my friend Festus here or Nils, you know, this is a job for everybody. This is a job for everybody. And we are all interested in driving change to a more sustainable outcome. So that's one thing that's really important. And I really see that KTDA is like an engine of change because it has such power, it has such demand that it can really drive change. And I'm sure that's why we're all here. I don't want to say too much more. There's this expression, and I'm not sure where it comes from, but they say, if you want to go quickly, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And certainly for ENSO, we're only really interested in going far, right? And it's not easy. You know, we've said it's difficult work, this, but we really need to make that journey together. And I'm very happy to give the credit to my team here, who I hope you'll have a chance to meet with Lucy and Jeffrey and Grace and Isabella and Evelyn. They're really the people that do the work, and it's my great privilege to work with them. So that's really just my closing remarks. You know, we all have a journey here. We want to go far, and we have to go together. So thank you.
Powering agriculture basically looks at promoting the utilization of clean energy technologies in the agri-food value chain. We look at 4 key areas, that is cooling, passive controlled solar drying, solar powered irrigation, and energy efficiency. So basically I'm here because of the 4th component, that is energy efficiency. We've been running a program together with KTDA and the Ethical Tea Partnership for the last almost 5 years, since 2014, looking at energy efficiency aspects. And to some level, I'd say that's why we are here today. Because one of the activities we've been doing together with them is energy audits of their 69 factories, which are scattered all over Kenya. Looking at energy utilization and how we can make this more optimized and more efficient. What has come out, as most of you probably are aware, is that post-harvest processing of tea is a very energy-intensive activity, both from a thermal and electrical perspective. Now, when you look at thermal, you're looking at basically biomass. And the idea has been to investigate ways as to how this can either be reduced or used efficiently. So this is one of the activities which we've been doing. At the moment, I think all the factories have been audited. The reports have been submitted as a matter of policy. But on top of that, we've also been carrying out quite a number of capacity building activities together with their staff. So for all the 68 factories, pretty much everyone, I'd say, is trained. The FUMs, these are the factory unit managers, and the production managers, 132 of them have been trained on energy efficiency issues. We've also gone ahead to train the operators, and I think so far we've trained almost 600 operators from the various factories on energy efficiency elements. In addition to that, we've also conducted, or rather facilitated, training of the engineers on the international process of being certified energy managers. Again, the mandate of all this was to make sure that not only do we build the capacity of them appreciating energy elements within this sector, but also to place them in a position to actually do something about it. To highlight on probably the impacts which we've seen so far, at least as of January 2019, 10,000 tons of carbon dioxide have been saved as a function of greenhouse gas emission aspects. We've saved 1.3 million trees and around $13.5 million in energy savings. Last but not least, mine were very few. And as Trevor has mentioned, as GIZ Powering Agriculture, we also look towards going far, not going fast. And we want to appreciate being invited here today. And we, on behalf of the Hub Manager, we also want to indicate our commitment toward partnering with each and every one of you towards continuing this agenda. Congratulations to the team for the launch of this particular event. Thank you.
Sometimes we may ask ourselves, why are we doing firewood? Why is it that smallholders factories are doing firewood? A quarter century ago, when I was a factory manager, yes, I've been there for some time, there was no competitive advantage on either using firewood or oil. In fact, there was scent. The managers who are here there at that time would remember, like Quiris and Nathan. It was cent, maybe 50 cents, at most a shilling. So most managers would rather concentrate on other areas of efficiencies because firewood is a very involving, very, and things can go wrong when we are dealing with firewood. So most people, most factories in this country were, especially smallholders, were running on oil, furnace oil. But now the scenario has changed dramatically. That those who are on oil, if you go to oil now, which is the next easiest alternative to firewood, it will cost you at least 3 times more than firewood. And that's why you see most of the factories are on firewood. I was reading a report this week by Wageningen University. Probably we are aware of this fact, but when somebody else puts them in perspective, then you can see them more clearly. And they were saying, in the last 8 years, when we have implemented farmer fuel schools as extension methodology, the prices have risen 26%, auction prices. But inflation has risen in the same period 66%, meaning that the farmers, in the best of circumstances, are earning much less, even if the prices are higher 8 years down the road. And hence the need for cheaper and much cheaper sources of energy. Somebody said here it costs up to 30% the factories spend up to 30% of their production cost on energy, be it electricity and thermal. And hence the need and the drive to identify on less and less cheaper, more and more cheaper alternatives for the factories to be able to deliver some income to these farmers. So that's why we are here, to see what other alternatives can these factories adopt. And biomass briquette is one of them. And we need to see, somebody mentioned that it's not the same as handling wood, so the training of the factories, the capacity building on the suppliers of briquettes, and then the continuous use, and then adoption. And we are looking at, if we are in one factory per zone, then we are looking at diffusion of that adoption to the other factories, neighboring factories, once we have perfected the practices in the 12 factories that we are launching this project. We read the budget yesterday, and somebody asked what was there for farmers. I think the only thing I heard is that pesticides, duty on pesticides has been reduced from 20 to 10%. So I don't know whether that will benefit the tea farmers, I doubt. Other than in their capacity as smallholder persistent farmer, subsistent farmers for other crops, like whatever needs to be applied pesticides. There's also a reduction of duty on raw timber. by 10%. Sorry, from 10% to 0%. So, and that brings to my mind the question, is there an opportunity for the factories here that are using firewood to access it from the neighboring countries that have excess wood, and at what cost will it arrive? And I think that's a challenge we are throwing to ourselves. Of course, the other one I heard is that there is a reduction in duty on paper and paper products and board products from 20 to 10%. But factories are on the tax remission platform, TREO, so probably that may not be as impactful, and the factories here use, they don't use natural craft, they use semi-extensible craft, so that may not be probably impactful to the factories. So the budget is out there. The only issue we have had is about raw wood. We see whether we can be able to benefit from there. So what else can we do? And what we can do is what we have come to launch this morning, and so that by reducing firewood consumption in the target factories by an ambitious 30%, then we will be able to get better, cleaner source of energy. I am told by Niels, who is in the room, that the briquettes he makes, he will assure you there are 20% moisture content throughout the year, or 15% moisture content throughout the year. So you are assured of the product you are getting. Where we are in the smallholder sector, and especially after the ban from logging from government forest, at one point we are getting timber directly from the farms to the boiler. So of course that has a very huge impact on efficiencies and costs. But if we are able to access briquettes at an even moisture content throughout the year, then we will be able to make even better teas, because tea quality is affected by all those variations in the moisture content of the energy that you are using. The factories have not been sitting. They have been investing in their own sources of sustainable wood, to the extent that they have a target of about 40,000 acres, and they have done about half of that. Of course, land is very capital intensive in this country, and the factories have to juggle all these balls. They have to pay farmers. Trevor observed that these factories are owned by the farmers themselves. There's no other investor in these factories. So the boards there have to juggle the balls of, one, paying the farmers, and investing even in sustainability. 50% achievement, and then again, from that 20,000 acres that have been acquired, about 15,000 have been planted. But if we were to put this in perspective, what does it mean? If you look at our annual consumption of wood, we consume about an equivalent of 3 million trees every year. That is every factory will do about 5 acres of trees. And if you look at it from the country perspective, that's about 10 acres, all cleared out every year. So in as much as we are saying that the factories are investing, if you look at the amount of wood they are consuming, then what else can they do? And they are doing this because most of the wood comes from the surrounding communities. They also do nurseries. And in the nurseries currently have an equivalent of about 2 million seedlings released into the community, so that in 8-9 years can come back as firewood to those factories. It's not enough. Probably you need to do a little more than that. But it's a small effort to ensure that the factories continue to access wood from from the communities, and also it offers the farmers and the communities an alternative source of income, in that they are growing these trees probably in areas that tea will not do, and probably around the hedges, and that wood is available to the factory when it is mature. As I conclude, we are looking forward to this project so that we can deepen our understanding of the availability of the alternative materials, that is briquette, the quality, the pricing, the supply and demand needs, handling and storage. As somebody observed, it's a different ball game for us. We have not been there before. And so that as the other factories adopt, they will be adopting from perfection. I am told by people who have studied our landscape that much as you see piles and piles of wood in our factory yards, if you sum up all the wood in the farmers' compounds and kitchens, it is much more. I think probably 3 times more than that consumed by the factories. And hence the importance of having the carbonized briquettes for the farmers. Because if you are able to supply them with their energy needs for their kitchens, then that little timber remaining that they are harvesting now for their kitchen will mature and become available for commercial use, and will also be available for the factories to be able to access when it is a little more mature. Of course, because of the ban, a few factories have continued to adopt. I think we have about 18 factories that have adopted use of briquettes now. So this project will go a long way to smoothen the operations, smoothen the procedures, smoothen the understanding, deepen the understanding of how this can be used more effectively for the factories and for the farmers to benefit more from reduced costs and from increased efficiencies of the materials that this project is offering. Thank you very much.
It is pertinent for us as stakeholders to get involved in how we utilize our forest resources as a biomass. There are 2 things which we should look into: the economic use and also utilization aspects. Because here, it is the livelihood improvements of the households and also the industrial consumptions of the biomass, which is pertinent to us. Us as Kenya Forest Service, we engage in afforestation programs related to environmental conservation, rehabilitating the degraded areas which are required in our country. And it is a key for the country to look into how we can increase the forest cover. Even in the Constitution, wherever we're working, all forums, they talk of forest should be increased. As we are lagging behind, as we compared with other neighbors, country neighbors, and the overseas, and we want to increase the forest cover to 10%. What are we going to do as an organization? What are we going to do as an individual? What are we going to do as partners? Kenya Forest Service, the strategic goal of Kenya Forest Service is to conserve, develop, and manage forest resources sustainably for the provision of forest goods and services. Why is this put in the blueprint, black and white paper? Because of the degradation that has been experienced. It is being experienced because of the climate change, which is all over. Why is that happening? Because of massive destruction of the forest. And it is your duty, it is my duty, for us to see which concerted efforts can we put to increase the forest cover. For us to achieve this, Kenya Forest Service, we have got programs that makes us to sure that all these areas in terms of afforestation is being done. The programs are the forest conservation management, forest plantation and enterprise, farm and dryland forestry programs, forest protection and security, and other support programs. Those are the programs that Kenya Forest Service is entitled within to engage in making sure that all activities pertaining to environmental conservation is attained and is achieved. For us to attain what? 10% forest cover. Even a child nowadays understand 10% forest cover. You as an individual, if you're asked, what is the 10% forest cover? As a farmer, there must be strategies that has to be laid and streamlined instruments put to make sure that we attain the 10% forest cover. The president is talking about it. The CS is talking about it. You as an individual, you have to see on how you are going to achieve the 10% forest cover. Forest conservation and plantation development as a program majorly focuses on gazette forest areas. Kenyan land area is quite big. And the place that is really gazetted, we are doing a lot of afforestation, is within the plantations and conservation areas, which is quite small as compared to the land surface area of Kenya. If you want to achieve 10% forest cover, where is the only place remaining? Is areas outside gazette forest areas. It's quite big, a chunk. And therefore, there's a need for us to see on how we can increase forest cover areas outside gazette areas, which is very small. And that's why my department, which is Farm and Dryland Forest Program, is engaged in afforestation programs in those areas, in the ASAL areas and farms. The farms that are owned by farmers, the farms that are owned by institutions, the farms that are owned by other partners and stakeholders. There is quite a large space that is remaining for us to increase the forest cover. Because if we are engaged only in the gazette areas, we are not going to achieve the 10% forest cover. To promote sustainable utilization and enhance efficient bioenergy use, we need to collaborate with relevant stakeholders. KTDA, institutions, and relevant stakeholders that can engage us in order for us to see the utilization aspect is achieved and done for environmental conservation. But not only environmental conservation, and also livelihood, because it is the household we should tackle also. Do you want to engage in institutions and leaving out the households, the farmers? We have to look also into their welfare for livelihood improvement. And within the livelihood, within the household level, they are also using wood. And that is where we should focus also, even if we are focusing on industrial utilization of the energy. So that area should be explored with our researchers, with the people concerned to see how we can utilize it concurrently between the household level and industrial utilization. Promoting effective and efficient energy-saving technologies through AskKFS. What have we done in that line? We engage CPAs. What are CPAs? Charcoal Producers Associations. We have engaged in. Also, promoting fast-growing tree species for fuel wood. That is our mandate as Kenya Forest Service. How are we going to ensure that we sustainably use our resources? We use the modern technologies. It is our mandate as Kenya Forest Service. And that is why we partner with KEFRI, Kenya Forest Research Institute, to come in and research which tree species that can grow very fast to that farmer, to the institutions, to the factories. Fast-growing tree species, because we want to conserve the environment. And how do we do it? A lot of research and development has to be there. Promoting efficient wood fuel utilization technologies. We partner. The past presenter, the GIZ, we partner with Apatana, with the KEFRI, and some relevant stakeholders on how we can improve utilization of our biomass wood energy. Where are the potential areas of collaboration in briquetting? You talk of briquetting. Briquetting is a charcoal, a carbonized charcoal. And it has been mentioned very much, the importance of briquetting and the importance of clean stoves. I don't want to go back that because we already know the importance of those. Now, the potential use of wider networks, the CPS, the CFS, community forest associations, charcoal producers associations, those are the potential areas. Another one, investors for technology and acquisitions. We have to involve investors because this one is a massive area that all of us must look into. You want to start using briquettes, and it requires a lot of inputs. You must engage investors to see on how you can use it in terms of modern technology and acquisitions. And that's why KFS is in support of initiative that will enhance sustainable use of our wood biomass and therefore reduce forest degradation and improve health as well as socio-economic development. We are in support of this, and that is why we are gathered here, and that's why you have engaged Kenya Forest Service, because biomass especially comes from the tree biomass. And a lot of products come from trees, and that is why KFS is in support of that. Some of the remarks I want to give from that, Shadrach mentioned about it. What we need to do, Shadrach, you have to expand innovative initiative to most of the areas through establishing production sites, trainings, and advisory services to farmers, to the households. You have established some, but we encourage you, we request you to make sure that you expand that innovative initiatives to some of the areas so that it can be massive. We also need to do enhanced production mechanism which is efficient and effective. Efficient and effective. Research must be done to that. Also, enhance collaboration with all relevant stakeholders to upscale alternative energy utilization. Research and development to identify feedstocks that are available and can make this initiative be sustainable. I've been walking around even the coastal areas about the briquettes. We are promoting briquettes of some of the areas. But you find the farmers are complaining that we cannot get enough briquettes. Why? Lack of feedstocks. Where are we going to get enough feedstock for it to be sustainable? Because we talk of sustainability in terms of utilization. We talk of sustainability in terms of consumption. If there is no feedstocks, it's us as the institutions to research more. Where can we get enough feedstock so that our farmers, the industries, can get enough feedstocks? We have to look into that. Research must be done for our factories to be sustainable. What do we need to do? We have to identify areas we can get enough feedstocks of the resource for the briquette. Secondly, not only briquette, let us do much of the research where we can get other alternative apart from the briquettes that cannot degrade our environment and that can also be sustainable. I think if we come to that table, round table, and agree, then we shall be home and dry, and our factories will be sustainable in terms of production of their tea, and farmers also will be having a lot of alternative use of wood. If we have researched, we find enough feedstocks and also the technology which is affordable to the farmer. Not expensive technology, but affordable technology. Enough feedstocks. Where? Research and development. Where are you going to research and development? Investor collaboration. They come in. We do a lot of research with the research institutions so that we make sure that enough foodstuff, enough relevant areas to cite is available. I think to that I come to the end. Thank you very much.
Yeah, this workshop is really coming at the right time because the last 2 years, the issue of forests in this country has been quite an issue. You realize as we are talking now, there's a ban that we imposed on harvesting timber from community and public forests. So this workshop that has been organized by Rainforest Alliance, the ENSO Impact and the KTDA Foundation, this is the right time to engage and explore how can we conserve the forest while at the same time be able to, utilize the resources that are coming from the forest. The ministry welcomes this partial switch from firewood to use of biomass briquettes in the tea industry. And we are ready to partner and work together. Of course, this initiative will go a long way in reducing the deforestation and forest degradation. As we are talking now, we are in the process of developing a strategy. For a long time, we've been talking of 2030 as per the planning of the Vision 2030, and that's when we had put a target for achieving at least 10% forest cover. In the last 2 years, there's been a directive from the president that we have to achieve this 10% forest cover by 2022. That's quite an uphill task, and as a ministry with the other agencies, we can't pretend that we can drive this alone. We have to work with the other partners, and the gathering here today is a showcase of how we can, partner so that we are able to, utilize the forest resources and at the same time conserve. We are in the process of developing a strategy for attaining the 10% forest cover by 2022. We are at the draft stage, and at an opportune time, we should be able to share this with you so that we get your inputs. Of course, looking at alternatives, sources of biomass like the briquettes, the solar, are some of the proposals that we've also put in the strategy. Yeah, of course, I know that all the experts are here, and of course, biomass briquettes alternative for charcoal are favorable. They are smokeless, they reduce pollution, and generally, a lot of it, the production of biomass wastes, you are now turning waste into a useful product, and I think this is very commendable. Yes, of course, looking at the budget yesterday, of course, there's 0 rating for timber. But of course, I know there are farmers, of course, companies who have also invested already in plantations. So as we, of course, look at that as a positive so that we can source timber from outside the country, we should also try to figure out how do these people who have invested in this already stand to gain or somehow benefit from this as well. As of 2013, the deficit for timber in this country wood was about 13 million cubic meters. This has since gone up to 15 million cubic meters. So you see, we still have a very huge deficit in this country. Yeah, as we explore, and of course the previous presenters have alluded to this, we should also look at the cost implications of this changing from switching, rather from partial switch into briquettes. The technology for processing some of for example, the briquettes, if you consider the ordinary forks, this could be out of reach. So we should be able to come up with fairly innovative technologies that can also be cheaply, can be cheaply afforded by the local farmers and communities. And of course, from the previous speakers, there's need to develop a complete value chain. Of course, I know this is already happening through this program, but we would like to look at a complete value chain, looking at building of the briquette and making the briquette equipment, training of the entrepreneurs on production, looking at the standards, which is also very key. It's good that as we move forward, this is something that has been going on in small scale, but now we want to exploit in large scale. I think it's important that as we develop this value chain, we consider the standards as well, explore market networks, and of course, we would also need to invest in consumer education. We are very happy and excited that the tea factories are, of course, use quite some substantial quantities of wood in curing tea, have thought of this partial switch, and I think that is going to go a long way in reducing deforestation and forest degradation. Like I'd said before, of course, turning organic waste into clean burning, briquettes and biomass would help save the forests and biodiversity, and at the same time reduce greenhouse gas emissions. As I conclude, I just once again want to commend the Rainforest Alliance, Living Earth, ESO Impact, and KTDA Foundation for taking a lead in starting this 4-year project, empowering rural communities and households with renewable energy. Thank you very much.
We are launching a project called Empowering Rural Communities and Households with Renewable Energy. And the scope is covering an initial 12 factories, one in every zone 1 to 12. And the other component is about households and enabling households to access carbonized briquettes, and so that they can be able to have their energy requirements met from those carbonized briquettes. That will enable them to, the factories to be able to access the firewood from the rural communities when it is available, because when the farmers and the communities use carbonized briquettes, they will cease to use the ordinary firewood from the trees, and the trees can become a little more mature. The factories can be able to access that firewood when it is mature, and then of course it conserves the environment, because the farmers will use all types of firewood, exotic, indigenous, whatever available, and this project enables them to access carbonized briquettes for their energy needs at that level and save the trees. The factories, on the other hand, use firewood as a source of thermal energy. Factories' costs they spend about 30% of their costs on energy, and that energy comprises electricity and thermal energy. Thermal energy comes from firewood, and they use firewood because it is at least 3 times cheaper than the other alternative, that is oil. And they have been investing, buying land. Land is expensive, planting their own plantations, and so far they have done about 40% or 50% of their requirement. And this project introduces an alternative called briquettes, and these briquettes ordinarily would come from byproducts of other processes like sugarcane bagasse, like sawdust, and it will reduce or replace about, the target is to replace about 30% of the firewood used in the factories, and that will go a long way in reducing the amount of firewood that the factories require. In total, the factories, the KTDA factories, will consume firewood from an equivalent of about 5,000 acres per year, and reducing that area by use of briquettes will go a long way in our efforts on conservation, and also to ensure that the factories can be able to access the wood when it has matured, and basically avail cleaner sources of energy.